Today's tale revolves around one of the most baffling criminals in history, whose actions are so illogical that the truth won't become clear until we reach the conclusion. Now, let's get into the story. On the evening of Saturday, October 15, 1988, at approximately 9 p.m., a 33-year-old woman named Cheryl Petrie grabbed a candy bar from the shelf of PJ's Market. This small convenience store, located in Port Orchard, Washington, was where Cheryl worked as the cashier. Instead of ringing up the candy bar, she handed it directly to a female college student who had just entered the store to chat with her. This student had recently moved to the area, and upon meeting Cheryl, they quickly formed a bond. It became a nightly routine for the student to visit PJ's Market to sit and converse with Cheryl, sometimes for hours on end. They would share stories about school, personal lives, and even secrets, making Cheryl a trusted confidant. Cheryl's kindness was infectious. She was known for her empathy and exceptional listening skills. She never judged anyone and kept their conversations private, earning her a reputation as someone people could confide in. Her goofy sense of humor also put others at ease, leaving them feeling uplifted after their interactions. On this particular night, the college student excitedly shared news about finding an apartment in Port Orchard, but lamented about having little money to furnish it or even buy groceries. Cheryl, upon hearing this, congratulated her and offered to donate some of her own furniture to help the student settle in. She also insisted on giving the student the candy bar for free, saying it could be her first snack for the new home. Surprised by Cheryl's generosity, the student initially protested, wanting to pay for the candy and keep the furniture, but Cheryl was unwavering. "I'll bring you furniture tomorrow, and please, take the candy bar," she insisted. Grateful, the student accepted the gifts, and this was just typical of Cheryl's nature. Despite being a single mother to a 9-year-old girl and a baby boy, working 2 jobs to support her family, one at PJ's Market on weekends and the other at a Ford dealership during the week, Cheryl always found time to help others. Cheryl lived in a modest blue single-story house nestled among tall trees, about an hour's drive from the bustling city of Seattle. The road to her home was rural and winding, creating a sense of isolation, and while the area was beautiful, it was also known for its troubles. Just a year prior, a man had been unalived nearby, illustrating the neighborhood's dangers. But this was all she could afford, and despite having little, Cheryl often chose to give rather than keep. After finishing her conversation with the student, Cheryl returned to her duties, reminding herself that she needed to assist other customers. Once the student left, Cheryl placed some change into the register to cover the candy bar, as honesty was a core value for her. She could have easily skipped this step, but she chose not to. Throughout the night, she continued to serve and chat with various regulars until locking the doors at 11 p.m. After balancing the register, Cheryl called her boss to confirm her shift had gone smoothly and that she was leaving for the night. As she stepped out of the store, Cheryl headed to her old Silver City car parked outside, ready to make the drive back home, knowing she would return to PJ's the next morning when it opened at 7 a.m. At the same time, her ex-husband, Roland Petre, was filled with excitement. This night was pivotal for him. He intended to win Cheryl back. As he glanced at his watch, noting it was just past 11 p.m., he envisioned Cheryl's joy when he revealed his big surprise. He imagined her running into his arms, declaring how much they belonged together. Roland's plan, however, left him with the challenge of explaining his intentions to his current girlfriend, a concern he figured he would address later. At that moment, his focus was on demonstrating to Cheryl how much he loved her and how foolish he had been to let her go. He felt certain their children would be overjoyed if their parents reunited. Reflecting on their complicated history, Roland recognized that the breakup was largely his fault. 12 years ago, they had met when he was on military leave, a handsome Marine sergeant with an enticing Cajun accent and a reputation for charm. Yet, beneath his appealing exterior lay a problematic romantic history marked by infidelity and deceit. Cheryl Petrie had been deeply in love with Roland, a feeling compounded by her insecurities. Despite her long auburn hair, striking blue eyes, and vibrant personality, Cheryl often felt ordinary and somewhat overweight, believing that men didn't find her attractive. When she met Roland, it was hard for her to ignore the glamorous women he had dated in the past. So, when Roland began to show interest in her, it felt like a dream come true. They married and welcomed a daughter, but soon after, Roland's infidelity shattered their lives, leading to their divorce in 1980. At this point, Roland's life spiraled out of control. He became involved with a married woman and concocted a dangerous plan to eliminate her husband. The unaliving occurred, but during the trial, the prosecutor struggled to pinpoint Roland's exact role in the crime. Was he the mastermind or merely an accomplice? Ultimately, he was convicted but received only a 6-year sentence. Surprisingly, while incarcerated, Roland experienced a change of heart. He realized that Cheryl had been the best thing in his life and began to write her heartfelt letters expressing his remorse for his past infidelities and his deep love for her. Cheryl responded to his letters, revealing that she still loved him, and they eventually remarried while he was still in prison. After his release, Roland moved back in with Cheryl and their daughter, and they had another child together. For a time, their family felt whole again, with Roland even enrolling in nursing school. However, old habits die hard. Roland relapsed into his infidelity, and soon, they found themselves apart once more. Now, on the night of October 15, 1988, Roland was eager to set his plan into motion to win Cheryl back. It was 11:30 p.m., and he jumped up from the couch to head out, but suddenly felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. Suffering from severe blood pressure issues, he fainted, collapsing back onto the couch. When he finally regained consciousness, disoriented and confused, he stumbled upstairs and fell asleep beside his girlfriend, forgetting all about his intentions to reconcile with Cheryl. Cheryl was scheduled to open PJ's Market the next morning at 7 a.m., ready to deliver the furniture she had promised to the college student. But when the first customers began arriving at the store, including the student, they found the doors locked and the lights off. Knowing Cheryl well, the customers were concerned. It was completely out of character for her to be late. They quickly began calling her at home, but no one picked up. In 1988, without cell phones, it was common to make several attempts to reach someone without success. Initially, everyone thought there must be a reasonable explanation for her absence, a family emergency or car trouble. As the hours passed, the worry began to shift from concern for Cheryl's whereabouts to fear. By the evening, when she still hadn't shown up to collect her children from Roland's house, he assumed she was just late. However, when it hit 6:30 p.m. and Cheryl still hadn't arrived or called, he dialed her number, only to hear her voicemail. Frustrated, he left a cheerful message, masking his growing anxiety. Deep down, Roland was disturbed by the fact that he had wasted a chance to rekindle his relationship with Cheryl. As the night wore on and Cheryl did not respond to his calls, his worry morphed into genuine concern. Where was she? What could have happened? Finally, late that night, driven by a sense of urgency, Roland called the police to report Cheryl missing. A deputy arrived at Roland's home to take down a report regarding Cheryl's disappearance. Roland handed the deputy a spare key to Cheryl's residence, allowing him to investigate further. Upon entering her house, the deputy noted that everything appeared orderly. There were no signs of struggle or disarray. As he explored, he noticed a blinking light on Cheryl's answering machine, indicating unread messages. Curious, he pressed play. The first message was from Cheryl's daughter, bidding her mother good night and expressing love. Following that were several messages from customers at PJ's Market, inquiring about Cheryl's absence and wishing her well. Next, he heard a message from Cheryl's boss, asking about her whereabouts. Finally, Roland's upbeat message played, left after he noticed Cheryl hadn't picked up their kids. But then the last message played and the deputy felt a chill. It was from a stranger who had found Cheryl's purse floating in Lake Union, near Seattle. The caller expressed uncertainty about whether the purse had been stolen or misplaced but offered to return it and left a phone number. Lake Union was about an hour's drive from Port Orchard, where Cheryl lived, and she rarely ventured far from home. Her life revolved around her children, work, and church, making her presence at Lake Union puzzling. Despite this, detectives from Port Orchard and Seattle began searching the area for Cheryl's car, wondering if she had indeed traveled there. Lake Union was bustling, lined with businesses and houses, making it difficult to locate Cheryl's silver sedan among the countless vehicles. However, on the night of October 19th, 3 days after Cheryl failed to open PJ's Market, police finally located her car. At first, it seemed she might have abandoned it. There were no signs of a struggle inside or out. But when authorities opened the trunk, they discovered Cheryl's body, brutally beaten to death. The investigation into Cheryl's unaliving spanned over a decade. Naturally, police focused on Roland, her ex-husband, given his history and their complicated relationship. However, he had a solid alibi with witnesses confirming he was nowhere near Lake Union when Cheryl was unalived. Roland was cooperative, even granting detectives permission to search his home. He was visibly upset by the news of Cheryl's death and even suggested to investigators that a young man had been following her in the days leading up to the unalive. Unfortunately, he lacked specific details, making it difficult for police to pursue this lead. Detectives interviewed a wide range of individuals connected to Cheryl: friends, family, co-workers from the Ford dealership and PJ's Market, as well as acquaintances from her church. No one appeared suspicious, with most describing Cheryl as an incredible person who was well-loved. It seemed impossible that anyone would wish her harm. Then, a year after her unalive, the police received a break. A journalist contacted them, revealing that a young man had confessed to unaliving Cheryl over the phone, but had hung up without providing his identity or location. The police encouraged the journalist to write an article about the strange call, hoping it would elicit more information. After the article was published, one of Cheryl's former colleagues from the car dealership reached out to the police. She mentioned a peculiar young man named Albie Brotsweller, who had worked in the garage and had a reputation for being creepy and short-tempered. Albie had developed an unsettling fixation on Cheryl while she helped him with his resume. Upon further investigation, police discovered that Albie had quit his job just a day before Cheryl disappeared. Shortly after her body was found, a co-worker noticed Albie had a deep cut on his hand, which he kept bandaged. Investigators also learned that Albie's father lived near PJ's Market, while his mother resided close to the area where Cheryl's car had been located. Roland's earlier mention of a mysterious young man following Cheryl suddenly seemed relevant. When detectives located Albie, he was surly and uncooperative. However, he eventually claimed he had cut his hand while fishing. Police interviewed his fishing companions, who independently verified Albie's alibi. Despite Albie Brotsweller's suspicious circumstances, police found themselves lacking concrete evidence to connect him to Cheryl's unalive. As a result, he was quickly released, and the investigation hit a dead end, leading to the case going cold. Then, in 2002, 14 years after Cheryl's tragic death, an inmate in prison contacted the authorities with a startling revelation. He claimed to know the identity of Cheryl's life-taker, Frederick J. McKee, a man serving time for manufacturing hard drugs. The inmate, who was cellmates with McKee, likely overheard incriminating details about the unaliving and decided to report it. Law enforcement obtained a DNA sample from McKee and compared it to skin cells found on the duct tape used to bind Cheryl's hands. To their astonishment, the DNA matched, confirming McKee as the perpetrator. However, as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a tale so bizarre that it captured national headlines, inspiring true crime documentaries and even books about the incident. Here's what transpired. Late on the night of October 15, 1988, Frederick McKee ambushed Cheryl as she returned home from PJ's Market. The precise location of the ambush remains unknown, but it likely occurred right outside her home. After forcing her into the trunk of her car, he bound her hands and began to assault her. Cheryl fought back fiercely, struggling against her attacker, but Frederick ultimately overpowered her by slamming the trunk lid onto her face repeatedly, leading to her demise. Once Cheryl was unalived, McKee abandoned her car at Lake Union, discarding her purse into the water. Yet, the events of that fateful night were supposed to unfold differently. At the same time Cheryl was closing the market, her ex-husband, Roland, was at home anxiously monitoring the clock, preparing to implement a plan to win her back. He had enlisted the help of Frederick McKee, whom he met during his own incarceration, and had given him a spare key to Cheryl's house. Roland's intention was to orchestrate a dramatic rescue. Roland envisioned himself bursting through the door to save Cheryl from McKee, whom he believed would tie her up but not harm her. He had even accompanied McKee to a hardware store to buy the rope and duct tape for the abduction. The plan was that when McKee attempted to abduct Cheryl, Roland would intervene, using his judo skills to subdue McKee, ultimately leading to a heartfelt reunion with Cheryl. However, at 11:30 p.m., just as Roland was about to execute his grand rescue, he experienced a fainting spell due to his blood pressure issues. Instead of rushing to save Cheryl, he fell asleep on the couch. Unbeknownst to him, McKee was operating under the assumption that Roland genuinely wanted him to abduct Cheryl without any ulterior motive. With Roland incapacitated, McKee proceeded with the plan, resulting in the horrific unaliving of Cheryl. Both Roland and McKee were ultimately convicted for Cheryl Petrie's unalive. At the time the case was solved, Roland was already serving a sentence for attempting to kidnap the son of another ex-wife in a misguided effort to win her back. His sentences totaled 40 years, stacked on top of the 25 years he was already serving, while McKee received a 20-year sentence. This shocking and twisted tale reminds us that sometimes, even the most bizarre plans can lead to unimaginable tragedy. Cheryl Petrie's life was senselessly taken by a plan so ill-conceived that it's hard to believe it ever happened. If you want to hear more mind-boggling true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.